up, y'all? This is Ben and Brandon back with the Old Style Angling Podcast. We're doing a question and answer this week. We got tons of great questions on our Instagram polls from our stories, and really appreciate the great questions we had. We had a couple, some sarcastic ones. Unfortunately, we aren't going to be able to get to those because we just got too many legitimate ones that you know they're going to take us a little bit to answer. So we're going to get to a lot of questions here. And I mean, I'm excited about this. I hope you guys are as well. And you know, before I get started, just know that everything that we say here is just, you know, information from experience and whatnot. So obviously it's an opinion. So just anything with fishing is all opinion, and everybody fishes their own style. So don't get too upset with us if we say something that maybe you don't agree with or whatever. But I think this is going to be really interesting, and I know we're both pretty excited to get started. So first question, we're going to start out with some trout fishing questions. And right off the bat, I'm kind of combining two questions here. It was, what is your favorite trout fly, and just your favorite way in general to catch fat browns? Emphasis on the fat. So for me, my favorite trout fly, maybe not for catching huge fish, but just in general, I don't think you can ever go wrong with the classic woolly bugger. They work almost in every situation I've ever come across fly fishing. I'm not a huge dry fly guy, although I understand, you know, it is more exciting for a lot of people to see the fish blow up on the top, and you know, the whole visual aspect of dry fly fishing. But for me, I like fishing subsurface flies. And this year, along with, you know, I don't usually fish a woolly bugger a whole lot because you can catch a lot of the, you know, smaller fish with that, although I've caught plenty of bigger fish on it. But I like throwing some of the bigger flies, like the sculpin bugger, which is basically just a woolly bugger on steroids. It's longer, more like a leech with a big cone head on it. And it's just, you know, sinks like a rock, and you can get into those deep holes. Or, you know, I like throwing a lot of streamers as well, and there's a million different kinds of streamers I could go into, but I wanted to get into a little bit of the spinning side as well, because I know both me and Brandon, that's what we fished for a long time, was with spinning gear. So we both have a lot we could say about that. And so my favorite way to catch fat browns on spinning gear is, you know, if I had to narrow it down to one bait, it'd have to be a number 9 Panther, gold and black. It's just a classic, and I've caught so many big fish on it. I don't think I could pick anything else. Although I do love throwing big stick baits, I'd have to go with the Panther. So let's see what Brandon has to say about catching big trout.
A Panther number 9 is a good option. Personally, I like to go up to the 15. They're a little harder to find. Usually got to order them. I know Amazon carries them. You can find some of them on the Panther websites. MEPS 4s, MEPS 5s. I like to fish the Husky Jerks. Usually, size 12 is usually pretty good for me. But I think when it comes down to trout fish, you're looking for fat browns. The most important thing isn't really as it is your location. Trout will eat almost anything when it comes down to it. If you get it in front of their face, there's a good chance they'll strike it. So personally, I like to find the deepest, the gnarliest stuff. If I don't think I'm going to drown, I don't want to fish it.
Yeah, that's pretty spot on. Yeah, I totally agree with that, and that's something I didn't even think to bring up. But yeah, just, you know, something that you have confidence in is a lot more important than color or, you know, anything like that. It's something that fish is going to be able to hit and get in its mouth, and you're going to be able to set the hook with it. It's the biggest thing with trout baits for inland streams. Yeah, so next question. This was a pretty cool question, I thought. Tips for brook trout fishing. What my answer would be for that is location 100% over any bait or anything else. Is for me, it's looking for streams that are more favorable to brook trout fishing. Obviously, brook trout are, a more fragile fish than a brown trout. You're looking for cooler streams, maybe streams that are a little bit faster than some of the slower streams that have more area for water to warm up, and they're not as spring fed. And with brook trout, a lot of times, almost, I can't tell you how many times this has been the case, almost 100% of the time, in the lower, maybe 2/3 of a stream, it's going to be dominated by brown trout, and in the upper third, it's going to be dominated by the brook trout. So that's just location wise what I would say for finding brook trout compared to catching brown trout. And Brandon, what would you say for that one?
Yeah, if you're fishing a stream as both browns and brook trout, find a lot of those brook trout further upstream. You'll notice, especially in the spring months, brook trout towards the top of the stream, the bigger brown trout in the bottom of the stream, and kind of that middle ground, you'll find a mix of both. But I think it's important to that if you're fishing a stream that has like solely brook trout, smaller, the whole thing is cooler. A lot of those bigger brook trout act like those bigger brown. You might, instead of fishing that bottom stretch for big browns, if there's no big browns in that stream and that water is cold enough, those brook trout will act the same way.
Oh yeah, definitely. Just one last thing I want to touch on there. Around the driftless, like southwest Wisconsin, that area, it's tough to find streams that are just primarily brook trout. I can think of maybe a couple off the top of my head, but up in northern Wisconsin and central Wisconsin, there's streams where you'd be hard pressed to catch a brown trout, and they're just completely dominated by brook trout. So, and there's a couple streams. I mean, a lot of those streams are a lot smaller. It's tough to catch a larger fish out of them, but there are a couple streams in the state that are just those brook trout dominated streams, and they're larger streams, and you can get some monster brookies. But it's those are special cases. So location for brook trout. The next question, personally, as somebody that catches a lot of quote unquote trash fish, I loved this question. The most underrated fish to catch. I will always answer the same species for this. People have asked me this before in a different way, but kind of like this. 100% the bowfin, dogfish, cottonfish, whatever you want to call it, is, in my opinion, the most underrated fish to catch. Me and my girlfriend actually went out the other night just strictly targeting dogfish. That's what we call them in this area. I know some people call them bowfin, whatever you want to call it. A lot of people hate them and think they're a nasty, ugly fish and hate catching them. But I tell you, if you get some big bowfin, they put up a better fight than a lot of other things you can find in a river or lake. And there's some big ones out there, especially in Wisconsin and on the Mississippi River. I mean, there's not a bad time of year to catch them. I mean, obviously through the ice they get pretty lethargic, but during the summer, it can't be. Those things are indestructible. It seems like you could be in a foot of water that's just completely choked by weeds, and there could be a 9-pound bowfin sitting in there. and they're just such a fun fish to target. And when everything else, it seems like you can't catch anything else, you can always catch a couple bowfins. So that would be my answer for that question. Brandon, what do you think about that?
So I mainly target muskies and trout, occasionally some smallmouth. But if I had to choose one underrated fish that doesn't get enough appreciation, it's not even entirely a fish. It's a salamander species, but they'll still eat a worm, and that would be the mud puppy, the four-wheeler. If you're looking for a good tussle, go get you some four-wheelers.
Personally, I have never caught a four-wheeler. I've never caught a mud puppy. So I'm pretty jealous of Brandon, who has caught several. So that it's something that's out there that you can catch, and I would definitely agree it's underrated, because I don't think there's ever been another podcast that has talked about mud puppies and fishing for mud puppies. So next question, thought this was a great question as well. 3 artificial baits. If you could use 3 artificial baits for the rest of your life, what would they be? This is like the hardest question anybody has ever asked me in my life. And I mean, it's hard to narrow it down to 3, but if I had to choose 3 baits that I think they catch everything in almost any situation, I would have to choose any paddle tail plastic, any paddle tail swim bait. I like Kitex, the Kitex brand. There's not a whole lot of difference between all of them, but that's just what I usually throw. That's what I feel comfortable with. So any paddle tail plastic would be one of them. Number 6 or number 9 Panther Martin. I think it's a staple in my tackle box, and it's a bait that I have very high confidence with, and I just don't think you can ever go wrong with it. And number 3, I would say a Husky Jerk. That's another bait that, I catch walleyes, I catch trout, I catch bass, I catch northerns, I catch muskies. They catch anything that wants to hit a fast moving bait will hit a Husky Jerk, and you can throw it in a lot of different types of cover, types of water bodies. I mean, small inland streams, Great Lakes, Mississippi River, small lakes, anything. It covers a lot of the bases, and that's another staple in my tackle box. So that would be my 3 baits that I would choose from. Let's see what Brandon has to say about that one.
I mean, my answer is very, very similar. I would also choose Bill. It would be a Pulsar, hands down. It's just, that's my top 8. That's my favorite paddle tail. It's, a lot of times. Husky Jerk, I mean, that's a staple. You have to have it, Husky Jerk. I mean, whether you're talking spring walleye, spring trout, I mean, even early musky season, right at the opening, we had a very, colder spring. You might have a better chance on a Husky Jerk than anything else. I've caught a lot of muskies on Husky Jerks. And my last thing would probably be some type of glide bait for musky fishing. It seems like whether the fish are negative, neutral, active, you can fish that glide bait slower, faster. I mean, it's a good all-around bait. You might lose a lot of fish because the hookup percentages on glide baits is, terrible. But, if I had to choose one bait, it would be that.
Yeah, that's a great answer. For musky fishing, I don't know if there's a time I've gone out in the last 2 years where I haven't thrown a glide bait at least a couple times. Maybe, some circumstances, if the water's real shallow, maybe I won't, but those are a great musky bait. You can't go wrong with throwing a glide bait. All right, so now we're going to get into musky fishing a little bit here. We got a couple musky related questions. This I thought was a pretty interesting question. I think I've said that about all the questions, but they were all great questions. So this one I kind of combined two questions into one again. So we got musky lure color preference on the Wisconsin River. So what color baits would you choose for fishing on the Wisconsin River for targeting muskies? And then what's your musky setup? So I'm just going to touch on this briefly and then let Brandon kind of talk about the Wisconsin River more and what he throws. But for me, I have a pretty basic setup for muskies. I always throw 80-pound Power Pro line. That it other lines are probably just as good, but it hasn't failed me yet, and I have faith in that brand and that weight of line. So that's what I use. For rod, I have a 8-foot St. Croix Premier. That I've had very good success with that rod. I love it. Some other fish that I target, I might say I don't think you need a high quality rod, or you don't need the nicest stuff, but musky fishing is not something that you want to skimp on. And I think that St. Croix Premier has just been great for me. And then for a reel, I have a Abu Garcia Max Toro, and that's it's been fantastic. I've had no problems with it. I used to use the round reels from Abu Garcia and like the round conventional reels, and I will never go back to that style of a reel. I like using them for catfish, but for muskies, I can't imagine going back to that. Although I do know like the Calcutta and some of the Shimano conventional reels are absolute staples in the musky community, and I don't want to hit on them or break them down at all, but just personally for me, I like the baitcaster style a little bit better than the conventional style. So Brandon, musky lure color on the Wisconsin River and musky setup.
Walleye, hands down, favorite color is walleye. I mean, if you look at my box, every bait I own, I might have a few different colors, but there's at least a walleye color of almost everything. Everything from bucktails, medusas. I don't have a walleye topwater because that seems a little unnecessary. But everything else, I've got my bases covered. There's a lot of conflict when it comes to our muskies eating the walleyes. But that's a story for a different day. But I will say, whether they think it's a walleye or a carp or gold in that stained water stands out really well. And as far as my musky setup, I also run an 8-foot St. Croix Premier. I like that rod. It's really good for the style of fishing that I do. A lot of the spots that I fish off the shore can be tight, so you don't have a lot of room to cast. I also fish by myself a lot. And netting fish with a 9.5, 10-foot rod is a pain. So it's nice to have that 8-foot rod. Another nice thing about that heavy action is, I can throw 6-inch jerk baits, 6-inch glide baits, and I can throw, regular sized bulldogs, regular medusas. And I can get away with both sides of that spectrum. I wouldn't throw anything bigger than that, but it covers all the baits that I need. As far as my reel goes, I run 80-pound Suffix 832. That's been a good line for me. And then my reel is a Abu Garcia Revo Toro Beast. It's the high speed, just because it's really nice for that shallow water. You don't have to go quite as fast on the reel, and you can still keep your baits up pretty good. But I don't know, that's what works for me. I don't know. I know it wasn't mentioned in the question, but I did just get a new net that's made life a little bit easier. I got the Drifter Predator XL net, which I love so far. It's big enough, and it's really lightweight, which makes netting fish on my own a breeze.
Yeah, that's an awesome point. Something I've kind of been thinking about lately. I'd really like to find some way to make carrying a musky net easier. I know they have them that break down and whatnot, but I don't know if anybody's got any ideas on that. I'd love to hear them because like when you're wading a river for trout, you always got your net hanging off the little magnet or whatever you do. And I mean, obviously, musky nets are about 20 times the size of your trout nets, so that makes carrying it on your back a little bit harder. But I just thought that was kind of an interesting thought I had the other day. So if anybody's got any ideas on that, give us a shout. The next question, fishing muskies by dams in fast or slow current, or fishing muskies in large eddies. What do you do to go about that? So I'm going to let Brandon take this one, and we'll see what he has to say about this.
So if I'm fishing faster water, I typically like to stay with my rubber baits, whether it be medusas, toads, bulldogs. They cut that water a lot better and they can get down deeper. It also doesn't screw up the action. If you're trying to throw glide baits or bucktails, they don't really cut the current too well. You're only going to get about a foot down, and, your action might be a little too fast. If you try and pull your blades upstream at a dam and be fast current, your blades are going to be going a million miles an hour. And if they're really, really active, sure, it might work, but I think it's going to do a lot more harm than good. If I'm fishing slower water or an eddy, I usually like to try and start out with top water. I mean, that's probably one of the coolest ways to catch a muskie is on top water. And another nice thing is you don't have to worry about losing baits. So if I can get them on top water, I will. But if that doesn't work, then it all comes down to, there's a lot of different factors. Weather, what were the conditions prior? Are we coming off a cold front? Do we have a storm? Is it fall, spring, summer? That's all going to play a factor in what I start off throwing. If I got, all day to kill, I might throw everything in my box through a spot to find out what they're going to eat.
Yeah, I thought that was a great response to that question. Obviously, there's a million factors that can go into what you're going to throw on a particular day. So, it's kind of a tough question to answer, but just two things that I thought of while Brandon was talking was one, fast current is a tough thing to fish because a lot of times if you're fishing by a dam and there's active fish, a lot of times they're going to be in the faster current. And so don't let that scare you away. And another thing I thought of is since I've started musky fishing more in the last, 5 years or whatever, I've been continually surprised at the speed of water that you can throw a topwater bait in. I would have never dreamt about throwing a topwater bait by a dam when, I only went musky fishing maybe 3 or 4 times a year. But since I've been fishing a lot more, I just have been shocked. I remember seeing somebody catch a big fish on a topwater bait right below one of the big dams on the Wisconsin River, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, and I couldn't believe it. I would have never thought of throwing a topwater bait in that kind of situation. So don't let obviously there's a limit where if it's the water's just cooking, it's obviously too fast to throw topwater. But don't be afraid in some of the situations where you got like a little eddy or something to throw a topwater because they can be the difference maker in a lot of situations. So the next question we got here, we're going to move into catfish a little bit here. So I got 2 questions. Go-to catfish rig. What is my go-to catfish rig? And then structure for flatheads, wood versus current. So I'm going to start out with my go-to catfish rig. Is essentially it's a variation on a Santee Cooper rig. If you know what that is, you got to be kind of familiar with catfishing to identify that one. But essentially, what I run is a larger swivel, and above the swivel, I run either 65 or 80 pound braid. I used to run a lot of mono for my main line, and I had better hookups on fish where I needed a little bit of stretch because I'm using circle hooks. So with circle hooks, you do not want to set the hook. You just want to reel into the fish and let that hook slide down and then hook the fish on its own. You don't want to be wrenching on it and setting the hook because that'll just pull it right out of the fish's mouth. So mono actually works good for that. But when you start getting into bigger caliber fish, when you got a 30 pound fish on your line, having that stronger braided line just makes a big difference. So that's what I run for my main line. And then for my sinkers, I use no roll sinkers almost exclusively unless I'm drifting. But if I'm planted and I'm fishing, I'm using a no roll sinker. And you want to go as light as possible. A lot of times, even on the biggest wing dams on the Mississippi River with the most water, biggest I'll go is 2 ounces. I like to stick with a 1 ounce sinker if I can, but if it's just not possible, if it's just moving around way too much, then I'll throw on a 2 ouncer. And if a no roll is kind of hard to describe if you don't know what that is, but it's basically just a teardrop shaped sinker, and you just run your line straight through it, and I just leave it loose so that when the line can run freely through it, and I think the fish pick up the tension from the line less when they hit the bait and feel the tension. So that's what I run for sinker. And then I'll run, obviously length of leader depends on a lot of things, but I run a 40 pound big game leader. So 40 pound mono essentially is what that is. And, anywhere from a foot to 2 feet and even longer sometimes. And then I almost always use a number 8 circle hook. Team Catfish makes a good circle hook. Gambakatsu makes a good circle hook. That's the two brands that I usually use. But a number 8 circle hook all the time. And some people listening might think, wow, that's an enormous hook. I would use that for a shark. But with the circle hooks, you want that wide gap, especially if you're using a live bluegill or any chunk bait or anything like that. You want a hook that the fish is going to be able to get in its mouth and slide out. And a number 8 is just fantastic, excellent size. I will use a number 6 in some situations if I'm fishing for channels or whatnot, but the number 8 works good for my style. And then what I'm throwing on the end of that for bait, it just depends on the day. Cut bait, I usually use a lot of cut bait during the day, and then more of the live bait during the night. Then the next question, structure for flatheads, wood versus current. This is a hard one to generalize for me, but I'm going to do my best. A lot of times what I try to do, I almost always fish the main channel of the river. I used to fish a lot of the backwaters, but I just feel that I've caught a lot more of the bigger fish on the main channel, and the structure that I fish out there is going to be more deeper holes. I look for like a 30-foot hole, especially during the day. If you can find 30 feet on the main channel, especially behind a wing dam, that's a good spot to find catfish. But another thing I do is when I'm finding those spots, if I'm fishing a wing dam, I like to fish a wing dam that has some big snags up on the side of the bank, because what happens is those fish will sit out in the deeper water during the day, and as it creeps into night, those fish will move up and they'll go into the snags and feed on the fish that are in the snags at night. And so when I'm fishing, maybe let's say I just fish one wing dam a night, or one breakwater or something during the night, what I'll do is I'll start out maybe at 6 o'clock daylight. I'll be fishing in 30 feet of water, And as as night progresses, I'll get shallower and shallower and shallower, and eventually I'll be fishing in maybe 10 feet of water because those fish will move up into the snags at night and feed. So that's kind of what I do. That's mainly how I fish. But flathead are very hard fish to pattern. They're a hard fish to target and to find. But that's my kind of my goal when I go out. That's how I fish. All right, so last question, and this is a topic that me and Brandon were talking about this week actually. Favorite time of year to fish? I love this question. I We were just talking about this, and I don't know. I might make a couple people mad with my answer, but I've said this a couple times in the last couple weeks. Just talking with my buddies and whatnot. But so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna rank the four seasons and maybe explain it a little bit. But my ranking of the four seasons, fishing wise: fall, winter, spring, summer. And I know there's probably a lot of people that'll have maybe the exact opposite of that. But for me, a lot of the times that I'm going to the Great Lakes are in the fall, or musky fishing gets hot during the fall. I do real well on the Mississippi River for walleyes in the fall. Trout fishing gets hot before the season closes in Wisconsin. And I actually spend some time down in Iowa after the Wisconsin season closes in November, trout fishing on the inland waters down there, while it's still open down there. And I just, a lot of the big fish I've caught during my life have been in the fall. Fish are putting on the feed bags, getting ready for winter, and it's just a great time to fish. Weather temperatures are ideal for me. And not everybody will agree with that, but that's my favorite time of year to fish. And then winter, I'm a big ice fisherman. It's right up there with open water fishing for me. I've always loved ice fishing, and so that's another time of year where I do a lot of my traveling up to the Great Lakes or to bigger inland lakes. And then on the Mississippi River, I do a ton of ice fishing. So that's my rankings. Why would I say summer is my least favorite? For me, it's just I don't like heat that much, and a lot of the fish that I target, it's just hard to target them in the summer, except for flatheads. So that's my rankings, and then I'll let Brandon take it away here. I think I know what his answer is going to be too, but go ahead, Brandon.
If I had to rank the four seasons, for me, it would be fall, spring, winter, summer. And winter, I don't know. I don't really want to put it at third place. I really enjoy ice fishing. That's a big time of year for me because, I don't own a boat. So during the rest of the year, I'm fishing off the shore. But as soon as winter comes along, I'm everywhere. I'll be, 4 hours north. I'll be out to the, couple hours south. I fish pretty much all over the state. And sometimes I even like to take trips. I've been out to North Dakota ice fishing with Ben, and I've taken a lot of trips. And Ben will vouch for me on this one. There's we do a lot of stuff that a lot of guys won't do. There's some lakes that in the winter, we'll walk 4 or 5 miles to get out to a spot.
Yeah, absolutely. Just doing things that other people, might not want to do. That a lot of situations, that's what has made the difference and, put us on some of the most memorable fish of our fishing careers. So, that's something that a lot of people, it's just getting out and having a good time on the ice or getting out and having a good time on the boat. That's means a lot, to me personally, fishing. But a lot of the times that we've done our best is when we've done something a little crazy and, maybe got off the beaten path a little bit more. And so, yeah, that's a good point.
Fall, definitely my favorite. I like to get into bow hunting, but with all the good fishing opportunities between the trout, the walleyes, the muskies, I don't really have the patience to be a big buck hunter. I get out bow hunting a couple of times, but as long as I can get some meat in the freezer, I'm happy, and I'm right back out on the water.
Yeah, so that's a great response to that question. Like I said, that's kind of something that we've been talking about lately, just because maybe we're getting a little bit antsy waiting for fall and waiting for salmon season and whatnot. But that's just a great question. I thought that was a fun one. That wraps up all the questions that we're going to answer today. I just really appreciate the questions we got. It was awesome to see the amount of questions that we had to answer. And yeah, I want to continue, this back and forth with you guys, chatting with listeners and just talking about things that the Wisconsin fishermen want to talk about. So I want to thank Brandon again for co-hosting it with me. And I hope to see you guys next week. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Old Style Angling Podcast.
Most importantly, go out and catch yourself a mud puppy.
Yeah, don't forget about the mud puppies. Tight lines, everybody.